Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this webinar, where we're going to be discussing a theme of business that's become increasingly important over these past few months through what's been an extremely challenging period, and that is corporate social responsibility, or CSR. I'm joined today by Peter and Lucy, who are going to be discussing the topic with us in a bit more detail shortly. Thank you both for joining us. But I wanted to start off by saying that if you do have any questions through the session, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen there. Type your questions in and we'll come back to those and pick them up towards the end of the session. So please do join us by asking questions. Corporate social responsibility, or CSR, is now a familiar metric of how well a brand interacts with stakeholders and communities, both at a local level and globally. Supporting the common social good has become just as important a goal as delivering shareholder value and profitability for organisations of all sizes and in all sectors. Today, the value of being a good corporate citizen goes beyond the pride and satisfaction of providing simple, altruistic support of worthy goals. Strong and consistent CSR policies have really become the cornerstone of the identity of many brands, with customer bases that now strongly identify with those causes championed by those businesses. CSR isn't just the right thing to do. Increasingly, it makes business sense as a way to deepen engagement with modern consumers, alongside kind of the more sort of social and economic kind of reasons for doing it. As a still relatively new component for most corporate activities, CSR kind of began 2020 with enormous potential to combine business and social goals into a symbiotic relationship, with each supporting each other and creating new opportunities for the brands and the issues that matter most to their customers. And then COVID-19 happened. Even now, without still fully understanding the impact and the effects of the outbreak, we can't really overstate them. Our lives on both a personal and professional level came to a standstill while authorities took on the challenge of stopping and then reversing, hopefully, the epidemic. While previous challenges to effective CSR typically affected a certain brand or vertical, the current crisis is unlike anything we've seen before. There's literally no business, no sector, and no economy that has been beyond the reach of the devastating influence of this epidemic. And while every business has been navigating the new economic landscape for its long-term survival, they've faced short-term challenges and been presented with opportunities that can be addressed using the values of CSR. The pandemic has offered a great opportunity for businesses to shift towards more genuine and authentic CSR and contribute to address urgent global social and environmental challenges. One of the core components of CSR for me is about putting a human face to business by communicating empathy, understanding and support, both moral and financially, for those who need it most. We're definitely in a time of need right now, and transferring the ideals of CSR to the dislocation caused by COVID-19 can be of great benefit to all of us, as employees, as consumers, and most importantly, as people trying our best to get through an extremely challenging time. At Newcastle University Business School, whilst we don't have a specific specialist CSR course, we do embed CSR principles and values into the modules we teach on each of our programs, right up to the MBA. We're not just looking to churn out employees for global organizations. We're creating leaders who are going to become champions in their chosen industry and demonstrate those CSR values in everything they do. We're a triple accredited business school based in one of the UK's most vibrant student cities, and we attract an international community of staff and students. And if you choose to join us, you're going to graduate open-minded and globally and culturally aware, ready to start working on an international scale. Obviously, CSR is a very broad topic, and it covers a number of different types of initiatives, but we'll try and focus in on some discussion points with our panelists, and that might help you to form some of your own ideas around this theme. We have Peter Edward, who is a lecturer in the International Business Management programs at Newcastle University Business School, and Lucy Kendall, who's CEO of COCO, who are a charity whose mission is to provide sustainable sources of quality education to children living in poor and marginalised communities across the world. Thank you both again for joining us. Okay, I'll start with Lucy, but can I just ask quickly, can you just please introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do?
I certainly can, if I can unmute myself. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Lucy.
So I'm Lucy Kendall. That was a great introduction. We run our international NGO from Newcastle upon Tyne, which is quite unusual. There's not very many of us in the region, but we work primarily in Kenya and Tanzania at the moment. We work with community-based organisations to develop sustainable schools, like Dave mentioned, and none of it would be possible without the support that we receive from companies, businesses and individuals in the Northeast.
Okay. Peter, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my background is a sort of a fairly long-winded way into academia. I started life as an engineer. I became a management consultant for PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then realized that my experience in business was leading me to ask all sorts of questions about what business is doing in relation to major social issues. And that led me to do a PhD and then to join Newcastle University. At the university, I've most recently been running the MBA, been director of the MBA program. But previously, I was also director of the MSc in International Business Management, which is one of our largest programs. And Newcastle is, I must say, it's a great city, but I was interested to just hear Lucy talking about operating an NGO out of Newcastle. It's a really interesting city because it has a long tradition with a global perspective. It's been very heavily involved in global trade for centuries, but also a very strong community. So there's a lot of people with a very strong sense of community responsibility in Newcastle, which makes it particularly rich and rewarding as a city, and I suspect that some of that background is partly why Lucy is doing what she's doing, having done her MBA a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a bit about me.
Thanks, Peter. I mean, obviously, Peter just mentioned you graduating from the MBA program now, Lucy. You know, how did your knowledge of sort of CSR and its principles develop through studying the MBA at Newcastle?
I think CSR, along with all of the topics that I studied on my MBA, were just, it kind of it concreted a lot of what I believed, which I think is the great benefit of an MBA. But the good thing for me with my cohort was that we consisted of a real mixture of professions, ages, experience. So everyone had a different experience of CSR, so it was useful for me as a chief exec of a charity that just thinks about corporate social responsibility all the time as a given, to be speaking to people who represented big business. Some of the guys in my cohort were from huge manufacturing businesses or telecoms businesses and digital. They spanned across lots of different types of businesses, but they hadn't really thought about it. And it was really interesting to see it from another point of view, but also to delve really deep into people and businesses that were good at corporate social responsibility and those that had the potential to make a huge difference in the world but had chosen not to. So it was great to look at both the people that were doing CSR well and those that weren't, and it just made me realize how many people hadn't really got around to thinking about how that was important for their business, although I do think that might have been skyrocketed somehow briefly in recent months, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Peter, I mean, how important is it from the school's perspective that we do embed learning about CSR and its values into both the master's and the MBA programs?
I think it's absolutely vital, because if you think about where we are in the world at the moment, and you know, you hardly have to look around to see the scale of the social challenges that we face globally, and the only way we're going to solve these is if business is taking a significant lead in addressing these issues. But you mentioned at the start in your talk, Dave, about how the pandemic is potentially leading to some changes in thinking about how people think about what matters, what counts. It's important that the business leaders of the future are not looking to just replicate the behaviors of the business leaders of the past. That we have business leaders of the future who have a different sense of the role that business can play in society, the values it has to play. And the whole CSR debate is much bigger than just CSR, because what CSR as a topic does is it fundamentally asks you to sort of explore questions of why is business doing what business is doing? What is the purpose of business for society? And so if you're going to prepare business leaders for the future, those are the questions you want them to be really thinking about, and to give them the tools and the abilities to sort of, yes, understand how to do business management, but also how to think about how to do it differently in the future and what questions they need to ask. And that's why it's absolutely key, these sort of, why are we doing it this way? How should we be doing it in the future? That these things are really built into across the programs, through the programs, because if you leave it as a sort of a bit of a sort of, we'll just pick it up as a side topic, you're not creating the changing questioning, the changing in the value systems, the sorts of, asking yourself, what am I doing this for and what do I want to get out of it, that is going to align you to really making a real contribution in the future for the benefit of society. So it's absolutely key that it's embedded right across all our programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, kind of, the pandemic and the resulting sort of restrictions and things that have been put in place, have changed things quite significantly. How has the pandemic affected the work of COCO, Lucy? How has it kind of, changed the way you do things?
Well, on a more sort of regional level, I've been running the charity by myself without my 4 incredible colleagues for the past 4 months, which has been really difficult. But we also have had to force ourselves to improve our technical ability and our digital offering. So we're working outside of the office, and we're all working from home and realizing that we can actually do that, whereas before it just seemed like it would be far too difficult to have everyone in a different place. We've been sort of forced to do that, which so from a local perspective, that's been good. And also I think that we as a charity will make some really good efficient savings in the future based on how we've been forced to get our head around new digital and technology opportunities as a result of the pandemic. In East Africa, we're still sort of waiting to see exactly what the impact has been. Obviously, we can't necessarily just get on a plane and go out there and have a look at what's going on. So that's been a good thing, because our whole ethos is to create sustainable communities, and we're only going to do that if we build the capacity of the partners that we're working with. So they've had to really step up. I've had to Zoom people and say, well, the money is not coming in, there's not money, so you can't just ring us and ask for money. Not that that's what we did in the past, but there would be a chance that we'd be able to put some funds together for emergency training or healthcare or sanitation in the case of COVID-19. But we were literally, our funding just stopped overnight. We raised money from events and corporates and individuals, and everyone was scared about whether they were going to keep their jobs, what was going on with their health. So it had a huge impact. But I think what it has done is made us work even harder than we worked before to become more efficient, and also to trust each other a bit more, because we haven't had time to wait to go through a lot of process, and actually it's been really good. But then there's the really negative side, which is I'm just trying to put an appeal together at the moment, because the issue in East Africa and in a lot of international, a lot of sort of less well-off countries is going to be not that COVID-19 is going to kill the population, but that poverty is, because the markets have closed, and that's been the biggest problem for our communities. We've used our traditional business knowledge to make them suitable for market. So they have jobs and businesses that rely on the market functioning as we intend it to. And because they've been closed down overnight, people can't sell their maize. The Maasai tribes can't trade their goats for healthcare and cash. So there's huge intrinsic problems that aren't necessarily COVID related. Well, they are. They're as a result of the pandemic, but they're more to do with the economics and the market system that's in place. So it's still unraveling now, and I think it'll be a long time before we realise exactly how big that impact has been.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you mentioned so you mentioned donations and sort of relying on sort of, people to sort of be generous and sort of, give to the charity. I mean, how important is CSR and philanthropy to your organisation and to the charity?
It's absolutely vital for us. We're quite a unique organisation, not in the fact that we're the only international development organisation. I'm having conversations every Wednesday with chief executives of other small international development organisations in the Northeast, and funding is being cut everywhere. And actually COCO are arguably better off than some other organisations who solely rely on grant funding, funding from the Department for International Development, which has just been merged with the Foreign Office. There's so much change going on a macro level that if you don't have that extra income from a diverse range of sources, then you're in really big trouble. One thing that has been great for COCO has been that I decided to wait before I asked people for support, because when the lockdown hit, everyone's main concern was, am I going to get sick? Am I going to get ill? Or my family going to get ill? And you can't really add to people's, it's about getting the timing right as well. And I think it would have been insensitive to approach people for support then. So we waited a while. And then we went to our most sort of loyal corporate supporters and individuals and asked if they would consider giving to us regularly. So setting up a regular gift, not a huge one, but just something to help tide us over, because we knew there was a storm coming. And it was incredible how many people came back. And a lot of the time, they are owners of businesses that we've worked with before. And as Peter was saying before, there is a huge sense of community and support in the Northeast. And if one of your own is struggling, you do sort of get on board and help. So not everyone has had the financial capacity to do that, but businesses that truly have a philanthropic CSR kind of heart at the heart of their business have said, I can do this to help you, I can give you a little bit to help you. And it's not always been cash or financial donations. In some cases it's been the offer of their facilities. If we were thinking about having to lose our office, which was a horrible conversation to have, but knowing that we could use people's meeting rooms, that we could go and meet in, keeping 2 meters distance in somebody's park. And people have really been very supportive. And it's not always about the cash, it's about being able to have conversations as well, because this whole process has been quite a lonely business for a lot of people. Being able to pick up the phone and talk to a managing director of a business in Newcastle that supported us before and just share the concerns that we have has been really helpful for me to see it from a corporate point of view as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we kind of move across to Peter quickly, I mean, obviously, you are coming from a slightly different perspective to Lucy in terms of sort of your position. You've got experience both researching and teaching about the CSR values and what they mean for organisations. Have you been or have you seen any research or learning about CSR that's come out of this pandemic kind of period?
I haven't seen a great deal yet, because I think we're a little bit too early in the process. And I was very interested to hear what Lucy was saying about the market and the economic aspect of this. And actually it's quite interesting that just this morning, the United Nations Development Programme have issued a report calling for debt relief or debt repayments to be shifted into universal basic income for the poorest people. and this is not just about handouts. This is about, if you want to get an economy moving, if you give it to the poor, the money to the poorest people, they spend it, and that spending gets the economy moving. So it's actually very effective there. But I think if you look at it, at this crisis, it's been very much a health crisis for the last few months. And businesses have been very focused on looking after their own people, just as the university has, looking after the students and the staff. And as Lucy was talking about, looking after her people and her contacts. But we've not yet moved into the economic consequences of this. And it's when we move into those that the big questions will start to be asked about what actually does it mean to be responsible in business. And I think the big companies will start to turn their attention to it. And that's when the interesting research will be, because at the moment, everyone's just been in a coping survival sort of mode. But as we come out and companies start to think about, well, actually, what are our priorities? How do we build better connections with communities? I think it's also noticeable that it is the smaller enterprises, or the owner managed companies, as Lucy was mentioning, who are very often the ones who have responded most positively here. It's the smaller ones who have the better sense of connection into a community that they need to support. The big companies, I think, have not yet sort of confronted the challenge that the COVID crisis is ultimately going to cause them. And I think that in part, that's why, from my point of view, as someone working in education of future business leaders, I am really keen that we have people coming out of Newcastle programs who are able, at whatever the level they are in the company, to ask different questions and to see different things to the, what the more traditional managers see in there, and particularly at times of crisis and economic crisis, as we will be moving into, to be able to think differently in those situations. And CSR and ethics teaching is what aims to develop that.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk there about approaches sort of being different, and perhaps some of the bigger companies not yet responding, or not being necessarily overt and open in the way that they're sort of dealing with this. Have you noticed any differences between different sectors and different types of industry at all?
I think the sorts of industries that have responded most to this are the ones that have been, as I say, closest to their communities, or have been able to convert what they're doing to, producing PPE or producing hand sanitizer. So it's been very much at the moment, there have been business opportunities that companies have been able to sort of jump on the bandwagon of. Whether you would call that CSR, I think that that would be that will be a really interesting discussion to have in the classroom, whether it's a live classroom or a Zoom classroom, as to when it happens, and get the different viewpoints from the different students. And one of the great things is, because we have at Newcastle a very rich, diverse international community of students, you get a lot of different viewpoints, people coming from different backgrounds, different life experience, that we can share and all draw on in the classroom. And that's an important part of postgraduate education, as well as drawing on those experiences and sharing them. So, and getting that debate going.
Absolutely. Lucy, if we come back to you now, obviously the pandemic and COVID-19 has impacted not only the people you work with externally, but also the people within your organisation. And there's a growing theory, actually, that CSR begins at home, and that internal CSR, in terms of engaging your employees and keeping them sort of, safe, and keeping them sort of, really involved in the business, it is just as important as supporting your wider community and your external stakeholders. You mentioned before about sort of having to close the office and people working from home. But what steps have you taken to look after your kind of team during this sort of challenging period?
Well, I'm a big advocate for looking after your team. As the CEO of an international organisation, you don't get to sort of go through life without burning out yourself. So I know what that feels like, and I don't want that to have to happen to any of my colleagues. So it still happens, you know, the worst person that it happens to is yourself. You try and look after everyone else, and then you go, hang on a minute, I'm not taking my own advice. So it's really important to me to look after them. So we've been doing Teams calls every Monday at 3:30, and we don't talk about work. So we talk about Rosie's allotment and Holly's not MBA master's degree, and we talk about Matt's just taken up surfing, and we talk about Jess doing a yoga course. So it's completely different. It's a no work conversation. They're on furlough anyway, so I'm not even allowed to talk to them about work. So it's great, and actually I've got to know them as, I knew them as people anyway, but it's kind of it's always been optional, and they've always all dialed in. So, you know, they've wanted to catch up on a Monday, which has been great for me because I was super lonely just on my own trying to run the charity. So that's been really helpful. And since I needed to talk to them all about what the future would look like at Cocoa, so I suggested that we met in Exhibition Park, and we sat 2 meters apart, and it's a beautiful park. We went on a lovely sunny day, and we took strawberries, and we had a chat with each other, and we talked about what life might look like when we go back to work, and what some of their concerns might be. And they were worried if we lost the office, that we wouldn't be together anymore, and we would lose that sense of culture and who we are as a group of people, and how we motivate each other on a daily basis. So we talked about how we could do that differently, and that led to me getting in touch with a lot of corporate supporters saying, if we didn't have an office, could we use your space? And that was received really well. And then recently I've just given a gentle nudge to our board, because every member of staff at Cocoa has a mentor on the board of the organisation. So the board are my bosses all together, and it just means that it makes me more accountable for what I'm doing, and I know that my team can go to the board and talk to them about anything that might be worrying them. And I think that's probably one of the most important things to have, to just know that you've got somebody that you can talk to about whether you're having a great time or not. And I've always had an open door policy. They can come and chat to me about anything anytime they want. So, but I've been really proud of how they've looked after their own mental health, you know, doing things like taking up yoga and surfing and being on an allotment. So yeah, they're quite good at that now.
That was great. I mean, following on from that question, Peter, how did the business school respond to the crisis, and what steps have been taken to look after, well, to support colleagues and also students as well?
Well, I think, you know, we are a research active university, so research and teaching are sort of core ethos. And when COVID started, I think we very quickly shifted towards really taking care of the student experience and the students, and realizing, you know, recognizing that they needed a lot of support through this. At that time, I was teaching a fairly intensive course on the MBA, and so having quite a lot of interaction with them via Zoom, and producing online sessions for them, something that we switched into very quickly. And then through the Zoom sessions, you know, just checking in with how they were. Most of our international students were still in Newcastle, but they all seemed to be coping very well, and had very close support networks amongst themselves as well, which I think is a sort of testament to the sort of very close relationships that we build in Newcastle. It's a university where the sort of the distance, the power distance between the staff and the students is very low. You know, so it's quite a sort of welcoming family in that sense. So an enormous amount of focus on keeping the quality of education for the students, keeping the engagement, checking they're okay. A lot more emphasis, or a lot of emphasis on student well-being, reaching out to them, because I think as a group of staff who are, you know, we're not just delivering teaching, we are actually emotionally invested in the experience and the journey that our students are going on. We really wanted to make sure that they were being looked after again, that they were okay, and that they were looking after each other. And then, you know, as a university as a whole, it's a caring university. So for the staff as well, I think the university has been very accommodating in terms of helping us to all adjust to working from home and working through Zoom. I must say, I mean, Zoom has taken me a little while to get used to. But you know, one of the downsides is you're not all in the same room and able to have that sort of lively discussion across the classroom. But one of the upsides is you do actually get to sort of see eye to eye, you know, eyeball to eyeball with every single person in the class. And so in some ways, the communication and the interaction is actually better with Zoom as well. It's just different. And I think we've made enormous strides sort of adapting to that, and there's a vast amount of work going on in the university now as well to prepare for programs starting in the autumn, to make sure that we capitalize both on the learning that we have had through moving to more online with COVID, but also do it in a way that keeps that sort of very friendly atmosphere that we have in Newcastle, which you know, is just something about the sense of community spirit there is in Newcastle, which makes it such a great city to work in and to study in. You know, and I can see Lucy smiling. You know, it's I have you know, I've run a lot of programs, and we have a lot of international students who come, and I say to them when I'm interviewing them, you know, you will fall in love with Newcastle, and it's a great place to come, and it's a really special city. And this, you know, this thing, oh, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But most of them by the end of the program are saying, you know, you were right. And, you know, and they're really sorry to leave, you know, the international students.
Yeah, I think that's true for many of the students that come to Newcastle. I mean, I moved to Newcastle 23 years ago to study from Liverpool, and I never went home. Newcastle very quickly became my
I can understand
city.
it.
So,
I've worked. I mean, I've worked down south. I grew up near Manchester. When I started working in Newcastle, I thought, you know, this is the best city I've lived in the UK. It's fantastic. It's a very manageable size and really friendly, welcoming people.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And there's many benefits to being a student, which we'll happily answer any questions about towards the end of the session. And no, there's an opportunity after this session, obviously, to connect with us as well, and to sort of have more one-to-one conversation if you wish to do so. There's some really interesting questions actually coming in from the audience, which we will come to, but I will remind you, if you are sort of, you know, listening to the session at the moment and you do have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box there, and we will come back to them in just a few minutes. I'm going to ask you both one last question, and then we'll move into those sort of questions from the participants. But the question is, I'll go to Lucy first. What are the key lessons that you've learned about CSR during the COVID crisis?
I think life doesn't have to all be peachy for people to want to give, and I think that's a common misconception, that we think that we need to be in an economic sort of haven for companies to decide to give for a philanthropic reason, for no other purpose than just to give. And I think it's actually completely the opposite. I think when things aren't easy for anyone, even if they're difficult for a company, it's more that they're much more led by their heart than their bottom line than I think we may have thought. And I know that might sound very naive, and it's something that maybe my 21-year-old self might have thought, but I genuinely believe that it's true, that people are, like Peter says, thinking about what matters, like what actually matters now. And what matters is that we have enough money to get by and pay the bills, of course, but also how we make that money, and at whose detriment. And and I think that the next generation, and I think the next generation have been fighting and shouting for a really long time for change, and they've been ignored because they're younger. And I think there are now a lot of people in business who are slightly more mature, who are maybe coming around to that way of thinking. And I feel excited about the opportunities. Businesses are being forced to be different. And I think different in many cases will mean better. So that's sort of, it's a big thing that I've learned, but it's a positive one. And I think it's really important now that we focus on positive things. We've had enough doom and gloom. It's time to start thinking about how businesses of the future can give back, and we can, I think that the end is in sight for inequality, but it's going to be a really rough road. We're going to need really great business leaders to get us there.
Absolutely. Peter, really the same question. You know, what do you think the key learnings are about CSR?
I think it's great to hear Lucy saying that, because I would echo all of that. I think one of the things that I emphasize when I'm teaching ethics and CSR is you need to think about how business fits into the overall social system, and that if you want to, I'm constantly told that we can't do anything different because we've got to be making money, we've got to be making profits, and the system forces us to behave in this way. So the system needs to change. And then I say, yeah, but okay, so how's the system going to change if business leaders constantly just reiterating those ways of being? So you need to move beyond just thinking ethics and CSR and actually think about systemic transformation and how it happens. And that's quite a major emphasis in the course, in the way we teach this at Newcastle, because it's in moments of crisis where the possibility for that sort of transformation happens. And for for the last 10 years, I've been teaching CSR, telling my students, when we were back in the financial crisis, people started to talk about imagining a different way for the global system to work. And they look at me, because they're all a bit too young then, to say, yeah, it's just, he's an old fogey just telling us these stories. But actually with the COVID, people have lived through that uncertainty and the pace of change, because think about how much has changed in the last few months, and how it causes us to sort of start to question how this system is working and who it's working for. And Lucy's saying she's optimistic that inequalities are going to start to be addressed much more now. And I think the interesting thing, and I think there was something in the Q&A about the impact of COVID going forward. The interesting thing to my mind is that when in the financial crisis, it was purely an economic crisis. So when they pumped money back into the system, everyone could say, yeah, it's okay, we can go back to the way the old system worked. And there's literature and research on that. But now it's a health crisis. COVID's not going to go away, unlikely to go away. You can't be solved just by creating money and pumping it back into the system. But the money that has been created is going to lead to an economic crisis now. So we're going to be facing an economic, health, social crisis, many more dimensions than we had 10 years ago. And exactly, it's the younger generation and the people who are going through the education system now, who have been through universities like ours in the last few years, who need to be out there saying, you know what, we need to understand the old way of thinking, but also how to question it and move beyond it. And with the uncertainties that are going to be developed, those people with that sort of understanding are going to be absolutely key to shaping how we get transformed to another system that works better for society. And you can't just say, well, business is the problem, because business is going to be the solution as well. But business will have to change as society changes. And these are themes that, we really do draw out. I draw them out very strongly in my teaching. And it's what motivates me actually to be in academia and to be in education, because I think it's really important that people are going out into the world out there to be future business leaders with a very different perspective to the ones that they perhaps have had in the past. And it's great when people like Lucy do an MBA and go on to do the sorts of work that she's done. That's, to my mind, that's more rewarding than when they go and become stockbrokers or equity fund managers or whatever.
Absolutely, no, and I think that's one of the things that that you will get if you choose to do a master's or an MBA program at Newcastle University. It's not just about accepting values and behaviours, it's about changing and challenging those existing values and behaviours in order to shape the way we are in the future, and to be able to lead effectively in what is a very dynamic and very sort of quickly changing environment that we find ourselves in at the moment. Yeah, Peter, sorry.
I just want, because that's also, you know, this is for a graduate degree. Undergraduate degrees teach you stuff, but graduate degrees need to teach you how to ask different questions and think differently for yourself. Okay, and that's what an education really is. It's not learning; it's an education to be able to ask different questions of yourself and of the world. Sorry, David.
Oh, thank you. That it's totally valid. We're going to move on in a moment to your questions, and there's a few different questions coming. You know, this is an opportunity for you to ask Peter and Lucy kind of anything around this theme. So please do contribute and just type a question into the Q&A box there. Before we do that, though, we're actually going to ask you a question. I think, Viraj, I don't know if you're ready to put the question up.
Yes, we are putting a question up as a poll. I'm launching it right now, and you can vote for your preference on this question. Why do you want to study for a graduate degree? Especially in those times, it's quite a valid question, and it would be interesting for everyone to reflect on what their goals are when they choose a graduate degree for themselves. In the meantime, I would like to also remind that you can request a personal meeting to discuss your personal situation in terms of admission to the Newcastle University by clicking on the link that I sent you in the chat box. And when you click on it, you should log in and request a meeting with the admissions team of Newcastle University. I will wait for a little more for you to vote, as I see that there's some people still voting. And I will also display, of course, the results and leave them to Dave to comment on and to our speakers. Okay, I'm ending the poll now and displaying the results.
Okay. Yeah, not unsurprising, I don't think, in terms of sort of the reasons why. You know, we absolutely offer a range of different programs, and everything we offer at a master's and an MBA level will absolutely be looking at improving your skills, your knowledge, and your experience, either in a generic sort of business sort of degree like the International Business Management program, where you'll focus on every function of business, to a specialist degree like international marketing or global human resource management, where you're focusing on one particular area of business. You know, the other really attractive thing about doing a master's program in the UK is that it's a 1 year, so it's 12 months full time, and it gives you the opportunity to not just get the learning and the knowledge from the program, but it gives you a chance to live and experience a different culture, and to actually sort of, you know, find out what that international experience is like. We have a huge network of international students in the business school. We have people from about 80 different countries, you know, studying with us. So you're going to meet people from different backgrounds, different cultures. You're going to get lots of different perspectives and points of view. And we actually find that that cohort teaches each other lots of things, as well as the learning you get off the academics on the program. You learn an awful lot from your peers and the people, you know, you're going to be collaborating with throughout the course as well. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Kirsty now to ask any of the questions that have been coming in through the Q&A box. So, Kirsty.
Hi everyone, hi. So we've got some great questions. And the first one I'm actually going to take myself, because I'm not sure either Lucy or Peter will be able to respond to this, but it was from Milena about how many of our graduates are now actually employed as CSR officers. I'm going to hold my hands up straight away and say I can't give you a precise number or tell you anything like that. But what I can say is the way we demonstrate how important CSR is to us is if you consider the kinds of businesses that our entrepreneurial students are opening up. And, you know, rather than going down the money-making side of entrepreneurship, they're thinking about how they can develop a business that can benefit other people. So, for example, last year, one of our alumni was actually awarded with an entrepreneurial award for his food bank app, where food banks could send out an alert to say what sort of stocks they needed to provide healthy, balanced food for the people that were having to use their food banks. And that meant that when donations were coming in, the general public could actually decide what it was that they were going to provide to the food banks. So that's a really good example. We also have Planty, which is a vegan meal delivery service, which makes it an affordable option for people who want to choose that dietary route, but perhaps can't afford to do, you know, the standard supermarket route. So they concentrate on everything environmental and sustainable, but in a cost-effective way for the customer. And then finally, we've got Bounce Back Food, which I think is based in Manchester, and it's another social enterprise for people who have to use food banks, but they maybe don't know how to cook. So this enterprise actually helps teach them how to cook, use the ingredients that they're being provided, and then from there, you know, being able to provide themselves and their family with these balanced, sustainable meals. So I think that's the key thing to take away, is maybe look at what our alumni are doing through business, and then maybe considering the business that they're potentially going in and working for, because it is something, like Dave said at the very beginning, that we are embedding in our teaching. Hi, Peter, I saw you put your hand up there.
Yeah, I think also it's important to say that, you know, you need to not think of, if you do CSR, you have to become a CSR officer or go and work for a charity or an NGO. We need a lot more people out in business who are thinking differently about the responsibility of business, who are just across the business in all the different roles, so that when people start to raise these issues, there are more voices saying, you know, we have to think beyond the bottom line here. We have to think about how we are connected with the community and the impact we're having on the wider system. And that will only be achieved when, you know, we have people thinking with a CSR or an ethical and responsible mindset right across business, whatever role you're in. And, you know, this is why, to my mind, ethics and CSR is about encouraging people to think about why are we doing this in business? Why is this happening, etc., etc. It's not about training people to be CSR officers or to go and work just for charities, although it's great when they do, Lucy.
It's true. It's very true. That's a really valuable point. Thanks, Peter. I'm going to put this to you again then, Peter. So Melena's asked another question about, if the global financial crisis continues to deepen, what are your thoughts on the future of CSR?
Okay. So I think what we've failed to do so far is to connect in the world the social issues we have, climate change, poverty, inequality, etc., to the way the economy systems. We still run an economy which is based on chasing more and more economic growth, and we have a lot of problems in the world that stem from that, not just around the environment and the like, but also a lot of the political problems that are stemming from it as well, and the trade wars and the like. So I think as this deepens into a financial crisis, and this is something which is not, you know, it's going to take several years for it to evolve. The future for, I'm not going to say for CSR, but for people, responsible people in business, the future for being responsible in business is going to be how business leaders start to connect into these issues and really start to broaden the way they think about what they can contribute to solving these, beyond just taking individual issues and trying to address them in a piecemeal manner. You know, how they can see themselves as a whole sort of ecosystem, along with the charities, along with politics, along with consumers and workers and what have you, to really say, you know what, we need this system to work better for everyone. We haven't seen that yet. We didn't see it in the last financial crisis. I am keeping my eyes and ears peeled for the start of, starting to hear that coming from major business leaders in the future. I think it won't happen quite yet, because I think we have to realize first that we can't go back to the old normal. And then the questions will arise about what is the new normal. Not new normal in terms of do we wear face masks in shops, but new normal in terms of how is the whole economic system working and who's it working for. And then when those questions start to be asked, that's when we'll get some really interesting thinking about systemic change. So I think the financial crisis is a really important part, actually, of what comes after this, to promote that rethinking and to get business leaders of business to think we've got to actually engage with these questions and issues in a different way. I know there's a decent cohort of Newcastle graduates already out there who are primed for that, because they've been through our courses. They understand what we're talking about. I can't explain it in a quick webinar, but over a few modules, the lights come on.
Lucy, from your perspective, obviously, from the charity perspective, how would you see the financial crisis affecting yourselves sort of now, but looking further into the future, as Peter said, as the financial crisis deepens?
I think it's probably going to get, I think it might be a little bit worse before it gets better. I think we've still got to find our feet, and for organisations as well to get there. I think it's going to be a rocky road, like I said before. Inevitably, we're looking at everyone's concerned about increased unemployment and financial insecurity over the next coming months and possibly longer. And there's so many things that everything just depends on, that we're all having to be as lean as possible and run our businesses as effectively as we can. But I think I do see that, I do maintain that there will be a kind of resurgence of better business businesses will recover. And there's a bit of me that thinks we've never seen a crisis of this extent ever before. So could we recover from it faster than we ever have before? That it's forcing a lot of people to do things differently, so perhaps, and the optimist in me wants to believe that. And I think the future of CSR does look brighter, but it's going to take us a little while to get there.
So I'll put the next question to Peter to start with again then. So how would you differentiate common corporate PR actions from actual CSR sustainable policy within a company?
I think that is a question I would open up for debate in class to see what people had to say, and I would do it fairly early on in a module, because I think it's a fairly neither CSR sustainable policy nor corporate PR actions are coming close to the scale of what we really need to do to have responsible business. So I think this is, that's a question I'll be asking in a discussion about how has CSR been done in the past, to try and get people aware of its limitations in order to open up, let's really think about how we need to do it differently, or be responsible in business differently in the future. And I was just reflecting, just thinking about Lucy talking about unemployment. One of the biggest issues that's going to happen with the financial crisis is with massive unemployment, people are going to say, hang on, who is this economy working for? Why am I being excluded from it? And this system needs to change. That question is not one that is going to be answered by just companies trying to have a sustainable CSR policy. It's a much bigger question than that. So it's a great question, but it's a question to ask very early on in the CSR ethics journey at university, and have a debate and discussion about.
I think I was just going to dip in there, because we looked at this when I did my MBA, and we did our CSR section, and It's showing how terrible my memory is, but we looked at the fact that there were lots of different ways to measure corporate social responsibility and how effective it actually was, and unfortunately there were too many ways. So it's easy to say, if you're looking at your bottom line, that you've made X amount of profit, and you know, you can assess your business really simply, well, a lot more simple, but measuring those kind of softer things like the impact that you're having has been something that researchers, academics and practitioners alike have struggled with for years. But we did discuss the necessity of having some kind of scale where businesses were awarded for their true CSR contribution, and that was measured effectively by people that are experienced enough to measure it, and not just kind of empty rhetoric that says, oh, where, and also to undo a lot of damage. I remember looking at some really evil corporate giants that were doing some terrible things, and they had an excellent CSR policy. So on their website it would say how much they're putting back into the communities that they're working in, and they would produce these beautiful annual reports that were absolutely PR actions. But they also, if you dug a little bit deeper and had a look at what they were actually doing, they were doing that to mask the fact that they were also operating mines that were dangerous for people in Zambia and all over parts of Africa. So I think it was one of the most exciting modules that I did for my MBA, and it spanned across accounts and finance as well, because people don't necessarily put that in their accounts, what they're doing is to be good businesses, and we were making the argument that perhaps there's room for that to be measured and for businesses to be, you know, sort of punished for not doing it as well. But I think we all know that things work a lot easier if people opt in to do them by choice, and I think that would be the preference. But having some kind of measurement to play the big business off against each other and say you get the gold star for CSR because you're actually making a difference would be a huge step forward.
Just coming back on that, one interesting initiative that I've been looking at is to do with using indices, so that instead of just measuring companies and sort of scoring them, you actually, what you do is you rank them against each other, and then you create a competition to try and be top of the index next year. Oh, we came third last year, how do we get to the top? That starts to change behaviors rather than just people trying to sort of achieve particular individual metrics. So there are some interesting initiatives starting to come into play which are using sort of the competition dynamic for the benefit of producing more responsible business, but it's fairly much in its infancy at the moment.
Dave, if I can just ask you to read the questions.
Of course. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there's we've been having a few Wi-Fi issues in the northeast today with kind of being able to connect. So apologies if there's been any glitches, but really quick question to both of you. Which industry do you think is most in need of improved CSR?
Well, the obvious one is the fossil fuel industry. I actually live on the west coast of the UK, and there's a coal mining area here, just as there is over in the northeast, and they want to open up a new subsea coal mine, which they claim is going to be zero carbon. And what they mean is it will be a net zero carbon in terms of the recovery of the coal. But actually the burning of the coal is going to be extremely positive on carbon impact. So I think industries which have such a blinkered view of zero carbon as that certainly are badly in need of improvement. But it's probably unfair to single anyone out. There are not many major industries which are not problematic in this area.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Whenever you look at sort of the damage that's being caused, the big sort of mineral companies always come up at the top of the list, and big manufacturing giants, and they make so much money as well that to put some of it back into something good, but also to have good practice is what's required. But I have a big problem with a lot of companies that I quite like the idea of, and I'm forced to boycott them because of their behavior tax-wise. And I just think we wouldn't be having to raise so much money as charities if businesses paid their tax. And I get really, really frustrated about that. And that's something as well that the younger generation can really push, because they're companies that you're using all the time. I mean, I am too, but you know, I want my packages delivered to my doorstep by a really reliable company, but I also want them to pay their tax. And I love a chai latte as much as anyone else and an eggnog at Christmas, but I won't have it if I know that that company's not paying for their coffee. And I'm constantly driving everyone at Newcastle University mad because they have a terrible coffee company in some of their, but I've started a petition and I'm not going to stop until it's heard. But I do think that it's really important, but sometimes people don't know these problems. That's the thing, and it's our responsibility to shout a bit louder. But also there should be rules in place so that it's not possible to do that. There shouldn't be a loophole big enough for companies to not pay their tax and not pay the people that are supplying them right down the bottom of the chain the right amount of money that would lead them out of poverty in the first place. So I think there's a lot to be done on the whole sort of tax evasion side.
Question, I mean, there's a bit of a long question come in. I'll try and surmise it and sort of, you know, kind of get it to a question you can answer, Lucy. It's coming from one of the attendees who has volunteered for a social enterprise based in London, but with a global kind of reach, looking about developing strategy and redefining target markets, and social media presence as well. They're asking you, obviously, you know, in terms of your experience, but also, have you got any practical tips or advice for new social enterprises and for new sort of like, you know, organizations like this that are popping up at the moment?
Yeah, I think that, well, one of the best things to do is to ask people that have done it before. It'll save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache if you learn from mistakes that people have already made. So I've been working in the charity sector for 17 years now. So and I've made some mistakes, and I'd much rather that Bobby and his organization that he's representing don't make the same ones. I'd gladly connect with Bobby after this to talk more specifically about how I can sort of help with potential pitfalls. But I think sometimes our sector is not very good, hasn't in the past been very good at sharing, because we're all scared that somebody's going to go after the funding that we desperately need. I've never really been too worried about sharing, and my board would probably tell you that I do it a bit too much, because I want to give back, and it's not enough just to get paid to do a job that gives back. I want to give back personally to other people. So I wouldn't have got where I am without asking questions of people that have been there before. So I think ask, because there's so much help and support out there as well, whether it's on Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups, and there's lots and lots. I can access some brilliant Zoom calls now. I mean, Peter was just saying getting your head around Zoom. To begin with, I was thinking, oh no, this is that thing that one of my board members has been trying to get us to do for years, and it just looks too technical and it's never going to work. And even I had to kind of come round to it. But now I'm able to attend meetings with CEOs of huge international development organizations based in London, and I don't have to get on a train that has no Wi-Fi and takes 4 hours. So I think it's brilliant, and I think there's a lot of webinars out there that you can look at as well. And social media, digital for charitable organizations and social enterprises is huge, but you've got to really stand out and get your offering right from the beginning and be different. But I'd gladly have a specific conversation with Bobby if you'd like to. I think I've found him on LinkedIn, so I'm happy to do that. But, and yeah, similarly, I just think it's good, just ask. You know, no one ever got where they are without asking people for help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that, you know, if anyone else has any specific questions for either the panelists after this session, we will put an email address up at the end of the session. You can send us an email and we can connect you with people. You know, if there's anything sort of pertinent that you really want to ask any of these guys. Kirsty, I think is there a couple more questions there just to sort of finish off with? Kirsty, I think we've lost your audio.
My audio, sorry, I'd managed to mute myself. So Milena has asked, what would your advice be to candidates coming from cultures and environments where the concept of CSR is still very new, but they are looking for a career in the field?
Should I take that?
Probably more Peter, I think.
Yeah. I think the cultures, it is quite interesting. The cultures where CSR is very new, in some ways, are moving much faster than the places where it's been established. So just the other day, actually, I was Zooming to give some careers advice to a former MBA student who did an MBA about 3 or 4 years ago from India, who's looking to move from the finance sector in India into a CSR role. And India is in many ways is world leading because it has actually introduced the first law requiring companies to engage in CSR. It's mandatory CSR. And so the opportunities there are not immediately apparent because they're emerging, but they are emerging very, very quickly. You know, it's a matter of sort of being imaginative and exploring and getting out and asking questions to find out what the opportunities might be. And I was actually talking to him about the opportunity to bring this more into the finance industry out in India and how he might do that. And you know, it's similar in China. Although China gets a bad press over a lot of CSR type issues, there is also a very strong emerging push at the citizen level in China, and I know it can be difficult sometimes for it to be heard, for changes in behavior and for more responsible behaviors and particular concerns about environmental degradation and the like. So very often it's where CSR is new that actually you have the most dynamic environment for the opportunities in the future. And so, you know, I think, I don't think you should look around at the industry that you have now and think, where's the opportunity for me then, here and now? I think this is true of any education. If you do a graduate degree, if you do a master's degree or an MBA, the value of that degree is not apparent to you when you leave. It's not apparent to you 3 years later. 5, 10 years later, maybe you will start to look back and you'll think, you know, I would never have got here. I would never have done what I've done if I hadn't done that degree. But you can't see it in advance. But it changes how you see the world. It changes how you think. It changes how you behave. It changes how people interact with you. And that opens up the opportunities for you. I don't know if you'd agree, Lucy, or not, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I came into my job fresh from university and started working at Cocoa when I was 24 years old with a board of directors who were 20 years my senior and had a lot more experience. And I worked really, really hard to get their respect and their understanding and their confidence in me. But I saw a real change after I did my MBA. Not only because I had a bit of paper that said I had an MBA, but I just conducted myself differently. I understood things differently. I realized that what I'd been doing for such a long time was, oh, that was strategic HR. I just didn't know what the name of it was. And when you can put yourself in that context, I think it just gives you an extra confidence and you see the world a bit wider. So you're not looking so narrowly all the time and you come up with better ideas. I definitely do. And you can also take pressure, I think, a little bit more because you surround yourself with an amazing cohort of people as well that I will frequently call on when I need their support and something. But yeah, I do think that there's it's a real benefit to have that behind you. And you just never know. There was a lot of people that changed their jobs. We had a conversation about this for our MBA, saying, oh, everyone's changing their jobs. They come in and think, I'm just going to get better at what I do. But then they had their minds opened and they had such interesting and unique experiences that a lot of them who were determined to go back to their own business but maybe get a promotion or get positioned in a different part of the business. Well, I actually know, do you know what? I want to be an entrepreneur. Or, do you know, one of them went on an island and oversaw the building of an airport. Yes, that's what he did, somewhere out in the South Pacific. And he used to work for BT. So I think I'm a massive advocate for education anyway, otherwise I wouldn't do what I do. But I think it's great that I can say that I've done it myself and been educated, and it's helped me to have better opportunities.
One of the great pleasures I've had running the MBA was when people apply and you talk to them and you say, this program is going to change you. And they come on the MBA and, you know, after about the first semester or the first semester or a bit, they come into the office. That's strange, you know, back in the days before COVID when I'd be sitting in the office, they come into the office and they say, I just wanted to tell you something. This program is changing me. And I said, well, yeah, I told you it would. They said, I know you told me, but I didn't believe you. I just thought you were just saying that as a sales pitch, but it really is changing me. And you know, that's when I think, yeah, education is happening here.
I think you're causing quite a few people to have some thoughts, because we've had some more questions coming in. So I'll try and sort of like ask a couple together. So if someone was interested in advancing their sort of their professional drive in accounting to achieve the culture of CSR, so I think they mean like, how could they maybe bring CSR more to the fore within their company or the company that they work for? You know, how might someone go about doing that? I'm going to give that to Peter to start with.
Okay, well, this ties in with the whole notion of accounting, because we tend to think of accounting as just counting money, but actually accounting, you know, Lucy touched on it a bit about, excuse me a minute. Lucy touched on it a bit about the need to have many more sophisticated metrics of what a company is doing. You know, accounting is really about how you measure what's happening in a company and what impact that has on the behaviors in the company. And, you know, this is down to the philosophy behind accounting, because how you create your accounts, and that's not just as the monetary ones, but all the other key performance indicators, changes the behaviors of the people in the company. And so there is a very strong branch of research and a strong affinity between the issue of accounting and corporate social responsibility. It's often not apparent in the way that you are trained to be an accountant by the big accountancy firms, but it's certainly something that if you were to come and do a master's degree, certainly at Newcastle, where I know we have a number of people teaching on those programs who are very, very strong in this area, it's certainly something that you would be exposed to and forced to confront. Accounting is not just about money. It's really about how the way we measure things changes the way we behave, and how powerful that can be.
Have you got anything to add with that, Lucy?
No, I think that was very eloquent, Peter. I'm sometimes a bit scared about answering those questions because it can kind of be more about my personal opinion, but no, I think that was a perfect summary.
So I'll just pop this to both of you, and I don't know which one would be better to take it, but do you think this is a proper year for a change or a career shift? So do you think this is a time perhaps where someone should make a decision to consider further education or changing their careers to something else? Is now a good time?
I think that's always a scary thing as well, because these are people's lives here. So if I say, yeah, absolutely do it, and then they do, and then, oh, there's no jobs in this, Lucy, why did you make me do that? It has to be right for you at the time. I think I nearly did my MBA 2 years earlier than I did it, and I didn't have the financial capacity to do it. And then a couple of years later, when the time was right, it was absolutely perfect for me to do it, and I think I got more out of it. Everyone's different, but I'd been with the same company for the same charity for 10 years, and I'd worked my way up from volunteer to director to CEO, but I hadn't actually had any more education apart from the odd training course, since my undergrad degree. And I was at a place where I was like, do I change career? Do I like what I'm doing? So for me personally, it was really good timing. And I think if you are able financially and economically and socially to give yourself more education right now, then I think it's a great time. It's a great time to try something new. The world is changing really quickly, and also these kinds of degrees are very open reaching. It's like Peter said, it's about you're not being taught in a classroom how to do things and how not to do things. You're being given the tools that you need to make your own decisions and contribute to society in a better way. And I think there's always a good time to do that, but it's got to be right for the individual. And don't underestimate personal circumstances either. There was a reason that there was 20 men and 2 women on my course. Most of the men didn't have to do most of the childcare. I know it's a very traditional thing to say, but we talked about it at length, and it needs to be the right time. So not necessarily if you've got other things going on in your personal life, but I don't see why not.
Yeah, I would reiterate this thing that it depends where you are in your life. I mean, I've made several major career changes in my life, and every time it's because I've got to a stage where I thought, you know, I need to do something different. I need to see things differently. I need to get out of where I am and open my eyes in a different way. And in many ways, when that time comes, you know that time has come. And I'm actually, you know, I've actually turned down qualified people to come onto our MBA because they've told me they want to do it because they want to get a better job, you know, or not so much get a better job, but, you know, increase their salary by so much. And I think, you know, that's not the right motivation to go and do a master's degree, whether it's an MBA or an MSc. You know, it's because you want to see the world differently. You want to learn different things. You want to come out as a different person. And you're at that point in life where you're ready for it. And I know COVID makes it more difficult, but in some ways, you know, we're all grappling with that issue. The world, I think, is going to change very dramatically in the coming 5-10 years. And if you want to be part of that change, there is a sense that there is some logic in getting yourself sort of up to speed, and through a degree and out the other side with a different view of the world sooner rather than later. You know, the teaching experience will be different next year because of more will have to be online and the like. But in some ways, that is opening up, and we're all learning how to do it, but it's opening up a greater diversity of ways of working. And I spent this morning on a training course about exactly that issue and how to make our online teaching with the combination of online and Zoom sessions like this and some face-to-face teaching in Newcastle, how to make that really engaging. And it's actually very exciting about the possibilities that gives us. I mean, my own experience doing everything online is, or moving online, is that if one was to do everything online, it would not be as good an experience. And the MBA students who I've been interacting with have been saying that to me as well. But I think the combination of moving more material to recorded material, Zoom sessions where you can have a real discussion like we're having now, but with the entire class, and some face-to-face is actually a very rich experience. It's going to be new for everyone, but I think, you know, we'll all be learning, but I think in many ways it has some, will in the long run have some advantages. So do you do it now or do you hold off? I think it's really a question of where are you in your head? What is right for you in terms of how receptive are you to being open to this sort of transformation in the way that you see the world, you know? And when you're in the right place for that, you're in the right place for it, and you'll know.
Absolutely. And I'll just round that off with, you know, sometimes where we face our greatest challenges, we actually find our biggest opportunities as well. And, you know, it's about just assessing where you are and whether or not you're ready and able to join us now, or whether a year from now it'll be a better position. But, you know, unfortunately, none of us are fortune tellers or, you know, can see the future. We just don't know. And the situation's so dynamic and so quickly changing at the moment. We just don't know exactly where we'll be 12 months from now. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Lucy, for your contributions. As always, really, really valuable, really insightful. And I'm sure all of the participants will have got an awful lot out of this session in terms of different points of view, but also some discussion that they can maybe bring forward with them onto a programme, hopefully at Newcastle in the future. If any of you do want any more information from us, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can email us on the email address on screen there. I hope you're all seeing the right screen. But you can email us and contact us, you know, and if that's to connect with the panelists or to ask us any questions about individual programs, myself and Kirsty will be delighted to connect with you and speak to you about all those opportunities. Many thanks for your participation in the session, and thanks to the organisers as well for setting this up, and hopefully we will connect with you all in the future.
Okay.